Recording in progress.
Good evening. My name is Mark Barnico, and I'm the Executive Director of the University of Chicago Francis and Rose Ewan campus in Hong Kong, our premier location in Asia, representing UChicago values of free and open discourse, rigorous debate, and the exchange of ideas. Welcome to the Pop Asia series. We're sharing tonight's event live via Zoom, Facebook, and YouTube from the University of Chicago Ewan campus in Hong Kong. If audience members have questions to submit, you can do so through the questions and answer button by first registering on Zoom. I also encourage you to visit our website at www.uchicago.hk and subscribe to our e-news for the latest news and information. Or you can also follow us on Facebook and our newly launched UChicago Ewan Campus accounts on Instagram and Twitter. Gigi Yan, our UChicago Study Abroad Program Manager and Special Projects Coordinator working closely with me during COVID, will wrap up tonight's program with a poll and more information about upcoming events you may be interested in. So please be sure to stay tuned until the very end of the program. The Pop Asia series takes on cultural topics that originate in Asia and impact the rest of the world. Tonight, we begin a new Pop Asia mini-series covering the Korean wave, where we'll explore one of the major cultural exports sweeping the globe from South Korea, Korean pop music, or K-pop. K-pop has surged in popularity over the past few years, fostering millions of loyal fans worldwide. It's especially known for its vibrant music videos and elaborate performances that include singing and group dancing. It's become a global force, especially as K-pop songs have held top positions on Billboard charts, broken viewing records on YouTube, and achieved sold-out stadium concerts. While the pandemic has forced the K-pop industry to do even more online to engage with fans using new, non-traditional means, the industry continues to expand and attract new fans. But how was K-pop able to adapt to these changes so quickly? And how has the digitization of fandom impacted the way fans interact with their idols and with each other? Finally, what does all this mean for the future of the Korean music industry? Our guests tonight provide insights on these and many other questions. So let's get started with brief introductions of our guest speakers tonight. Dr. Rebecca Chioko King Orion is a senior lecturer in the Department of Sociology at Maynooth University in the Republic of Ireland. Her research interests are in popular culture, globalization, emotions and technology, race and ethnic beauty pageants, and critical mixed race studies. Her current research explores globalized, interpersonal, and interactive forms of bodily culture in Asia and Europe, and Asian popular culture, including Korean and Japanese popular music and dramas, and digital technology. Dr. Jimian Park is a visiting lecturer at Sciences Po Paris, France, and a researcher at the Institute of Communication Research at Seoul National University, Korea. He's published academic articles and conducted research projects related to competitiveness of organizations, industries, and countries. One of those projects focused on the digital transformation of the Korean music industry, and the global emergence of K-pop. Dr. Park's main research topics are on strategies of different business systems and cultures with historical approaches. And finally, we're doing something a little different for this series tonight. We have Jenna Gibson, a PhD student in the Department of Political Science at the University of Chicago, who will moderate the program. In the additional resources link on our event page, you'll see that Jenna was featured in a New Yorker magazine video discussing her views on K-pop. I urge you to check that out. Jenna's research interests include media effects, political communication, and public and cultural diplomacy. Jenna is a regular contributor to the Korean column for The Diplomat and has also written about Korean social issues for foreign policy. Before pursuing her doctorate, Jenna was a director of communications at the Korea Economic Institute of America and has previously lived in Cheonan, South Korea for 2 years as a Fulbright English teaching assistant. Jenna, thanks for putting this program together and for joining us tonight. I'll turn the program over to you and your guest to get us started.
Thanks so much, Mark, for the great introduction, and good morning from Chicago. Hopefully we have a lot of viewers coming in from all over the world, and that you can enjoy this great discussion that we're able to have over Zoom today. So I really want to just jump right in. We have a lot of great questions that have come in from people registering for the event. And again, I really encourage you to use the Q&A function on Zoom. If you have questions, we will get to those towards the end. But just to start us off, I want to first go to Dr. Park. Can you give us a bit of a background on how we got here? How did the K-pop industry handle technological change over time? And did that make it easier for them to go fully online during the COVID pandemic?
Jenna, okay, this is a very interesting question, and this is very important to understand. Okay, I think the best way to talk about it, actually, I have a video clip I would like to share with you, and it lasts like 1 minute, so it's very important. So let me see. Hold on.
Back in 2001, you said this to your staff. You said, "We don't make music, we make stars." Why did you say that? What were you driving at there?
I mean, I have to confess that it wasn't because I was smart. It was just because I was forced to. 80% of Korean computers were high-speed cable connected. So when the Napster type of programs came out, it hit Korea the most fastest and most severely. So we lost 90% of the physical CD market. So I had no choice but to change our business model. So, okay, now when everything's turning digital, where should I go? So my thought was, what's the most analog thing in the world? Is human being. So no matter what happens on the way how we distribute music, the fact that we need a star would never change. So that was my safest bet, to concentrate on the human beings. So I got all my employees in the auditorium and said, okay, from today, we don't make music, we make stars. So our final product is not music, but human beings. As soon
I'm not sure if you can hear it well or not, but right. So basically, this guy is Park Jin-young. So he's one of the famous CEO in Korean music industry. So the interesting thing is, like, instead of he focusing on digitization of Korean music industry, he said, because of the fast internet and then computer, he said 90% of physical album sales collapsed in Korea. So basically, if you should not point out digitization in order to explain the success of Korean music industry. That means basically you have to think about so many different things. Well, just like other Asian countries such as like China and Hong Kong, also many Southeast Asian countries, Korea didn't have really well developed copyright system. I mean, as a member of OECD country, Korea should have good copyright. However, before, people, they don't respect it. And then album sales, it did not work. So basically what they have to do is, try to focus on video, television at the time, okay? So this is why, K-pop music industry, they focus a lot on dance, cosmetic, and outfit and dress, and these kind of things. Of course. Also, there's another thing which is very important. You should not forget that it's globalization. A lot of people, they try to explain that, K-pop in Korea and then K-pop is from Korea. But, you have to think about one thing, the music we do, what we call, K-pop, it is not really Korean traditional music. It is like a mixture of a bunch of different things, mainly from the United States. And also we have a lot of influence from Japan and other countries. Of course, there's something, from Korea. So basically we mix around and we globalize, everything. And then this is one thing, you have to think about it. Another one is like a digitization. And then also this one is related to social network services and then streaming. And then if we understand the internet, actually, this is not really Korea specific, which means basically Japan, United States, France, Hong Kong and China, if they like, they can utilize this kind of medium in order to diffuse their music, okay? Then you have to think about then why Korean music industry, they are really willing to use this kind of medium, okay? Back to the previous story, actually this is much related to copyright, okay? So at state level, we maintain the copyright, the level of copyright just like other OECD countries. However, if the copyright holder, okay, does not want to exercise copyright, then this is a totally different story, okay? The Korean music industry, especially the companies, they are willing to share their music with others. They don't care much about the copyright because in the era of digitization, they know that the diffusion is the most important thing. They cannot make profits out of sales of physical album anymore. Okay, so they are willing to incorporate digitization, and they don't care much about copyright, and they globalize everything. This is why we mix around the English lyrics. Sometimes we hire people from Thailand, United States, China, and then you can see, this kind of things happening, and then it helps the Korean music industry to, emerge globally.
Great. So then I want to move over to Dr. King Orion. What impact has this had on fans themselves? So we talked a lot about kind of changes in copyright, changes in digitization. On the industry side, but then fans obviously have changed a lot as well. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I think there are kind of three components or elements here. I mean, first, of course, are the production corporations, which Dr. Park just spoke about. But big companies that get public and private capital actually invested in them, who recruit young talent, sign them to long contracts. Artists actually don't make that much money off of the music. And a lot of the kind of profits are plowed back into the company in terms of development. And so I think it's an interesting developmental model for corporations. That's the first piece. The second piece, of course, is technology. And the third piece, of course, are the fans themselves. And I would argue the emotions of fans are actually what's driving a lot of this. So most of the fans of K-pop, you have to remember, are not in Korea, actually. So the majority of fans are outside of Korea. They don't speak or read or write in the Korean language, and they don't have very many chances to actually see their favorite band, or in kind of K-pop lingo, their idols, right? So they don't get to see their favorite bands or their favorite idols in person very often. So the vast majority of the fandom, of course, was already online, right? Their only way to have access to these groups or their idols was actually through technology, right? And so I think technology is interesting, and I think the Korean companies, production companies, have been particularly good at figuring out how to use technology, particularly social media and digital technology, in order to reach out to the fans and to grow the fandom. And of course, they do this because now for most people, technology is very fast and there's easy access around the world. And so this really lowered the barriers for participation in digital technology on platforms like YouTube and TikTok, where you didn't have to pay and you didn't need a subscription necessarily to participate. But I think the second aspect of the technologies for fans was that it was visually driven. So again, if I'm, a white girl sitting in Minnesota, but I'm a K-pop fan, and I don't speak Korean, the fact that I can watch the music video on YouTube and I can get a lot through visually rather than just text or lyrics meant that it actually allowed even people who didn't understand the lyrics to really appreciate the dancing and the musicality, the fashion and the appearance, particularly, I think, of K-pop idols. And of course, something like YouTube is also user-generated content driven. So a lot of the fans started making their own videos, reaction videos, copying the dance videos. And so I think everything from fan fiction on Wattpad to YouTube tribute dances or dance flash mobs, you see a lot of that kind of user participation actually spurred even actually more participation in the K-pop fandom because they could actually participate. And of course, you have to remember that the vast majority of K-pop fans are under the age of 30. And so these young people are very online, right? They're used to being in what we call a polymedia environment. They're used to using many different kinds of media and media platforms for different things. So I noticed in the Q&A, someone wants us to talk about BTS. So the example of BTS's concert last month, which was their 8th kind of anniversary concert, you get fans streaming the concert live on Weverse, which is of course a Korean app, with their Bluetooth light sticks linked to 1.3 million people across the world. At the same time, they're having a Zoom streaming video chat with their local fan club members, local army members. That's the name of the fan club of BTS. And at the same time, there are also a lot of them using their phones to take video captures and photograph captures that they'll later upload to their Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok accounts. So you can see that, these young people are used to kind of swimming around in this as polymedia environment. And so I think because they're very online, because they're comfortable in these media environments, and they also like the fact that there's user-generated content, even though they're not in Korea, I think they are strong participants. And then the last thing is, of course, what the thing I'm most interested in actually is their emotions. So the K-pop fandom is often described as intensely passionate, that they're aptly named, BTS's fan groups are aptly named as the army because they operate as an army. And I think what's interesting to me is no matter what the technology or no matter what the music, the same fact remains that the reason that a group like BTS are popular is because of the fans, and the fans are passionate because they feel emotionally connected to the group. So this effective digital consumption is because they feel closer to their K-pop idols or bands than the Western counterparts like Justin Bieber or, the Swifties for Taylor Swift. And they feel that there's more often and better digital kind of social media engagement from the stars or the bands to their fans than their Western counterparts.
Yeah, this is a perfect transition because you're talking about online concerts. You mentioned BTS's recent online concert, which obviously right now we can only have online concerts in most parts of the world. So, starting in 2020, the industry and the fandom had to switch to fully online events. But as you both have mentioned, we were kind of primed to do that. The industry was primed to do that. They had this digital technology available, and they had a fandom that was generally used to consuming things digitally. So what has been the reaction like? I'll start with Dr. Park on the industry side, and then we'll talk about fans as well. How have things been going since the last year and a half, this switch to completely digital K-pop?
Vicky, you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. I mean, I think there is no arguing that the success of this. I think it used to be that both kind of pop cultural pundits and also business people used to kind of poo-poo K-pop as a flash in the pan with kind of screening teenagers. It won't last. I think that's gone out the window. I mean, I just looked up Big Hit, or Hybe as it's now known, which is BTS's company. Their profits for the first quarter and this year were up 29%, having had almost an entire year online for a revenue of 161 million US dollars. So yeah, I think it's pretty successful. I think it's undoubtedly successful and has been, as Jenna said, in the last year with digitization. And I think part of this is, as Jenna mentioned, I think overseas fans certainly were already primed. They were already on multiple platforms following their favorite bands. They were already watching online meet and greets, video clips of concerts. Everything was online, even the backstage, kind of glimpses, video glimpses. It was all digitized. And I think that the companies were very clever. They were very quick to move online, and the concerts were very, very well done. The production value was really high. It's very slick. And I think for the companies, being online meant they had an unlimited stadium space, right? There was no social distancing. There wasn't a limit on how many tickets you could sell. And so you get like literally the biggest audience in the world. And again, BTS last month, right? 1.33 million paid viewers of their concert from over 195 countries over 2 days. They set a world record. I think other industries haven't been able to compete with this. And so I think it's because they were ready, they were primed on the tech platforms, but also because of the way that it was packaged to an already kind of very online group of people.
Talking about from business side, it's very interesting to see what is going on after COVID. Okay, so basically, the people, they cannot move around, and then it is difficult to have concert. So there's two kind of movement. The first one is the companies, they try to localize themselves. Already like Becky said, for example, like BTS, the BTS Entertainment, they try to make it bigger, and then they also, emanate with American companies. So they set up, Hybe. So that means basically not just using Korean talents in the United States, but they also want to utilize the American talents in United States. Also, companies, some, for example, SM Entertainment, they went to China, and then they are not using actual Korean talent, but they are using Chinese talent. So they make Chinese local idol group, and they are using that. So again, you have to see from business side, and then you know that it's pretty different. It's not just about Korea. It's not just about Korea, but it is for company itself. Another interesting thing is like online. As Rebecca already explained, because the Korean pop groups, they gained a lot of population from here and there, which means basically it generates a lot of profits, and then they do have a lot of fan base. So that means basically for them, they are free to utilize a lot of different technologies. Doesn't matter if it's old and new, or it's traditional or innovative. They try to utilize this one, and they can observe the reaction from other, fandoms. So this way, they say, okay, this is well accepted. This one is not. Then why don't we utilize this one, for the next time? So, this kind of a lot of, trial and errors, and it helps the Korean music industry go beyond, their stages. Another interesting thing is that actually during the COVID, people, they talk about the number of fandom for Korean music industry increased significantly. Which means basically online like YouTube and Facebook, a lot of Korean K-pop content were available online, and then people, they are looking at it. But from business side, for example, like Google, YouTube, and Facebook, they are always looking for generating more profits. And they already know that if they show K-pop contents, and there's a lot of people who want to click it, which means basically it's automatically linked to watching advertisement. So recommending Korean music video or Korean content, it helps generating their profits. So they are willing to, recommend K-pop video more and more. So, you can see this kind of thing. Another thing, very interesting, when it comes to each member of the band, long time ago, people, they talk about, oh, this band, they dance a lot, they dance really well, or they sing really well. Oh, he's handsome, he's pretty, or this kind of things. But recently, if you go over YouTube video clips, actually, they do not talk about only, this kind of things, but they also talk about other things. For example, oh, this guy is cool, like Jimin Park, from BTS, is very kind, he dances well, he's very sweet, this kind of thing. And you have to understand how people got to know about his personality, So this is also related to copyright, So basically, fandoms, they watch Korean dramas or Korean entertainment, variety shows, and then they copy and then they just put some, clips and then they share it. So basically, this is not just about the singing or dancing, but also the way they talk, the way they do, a lot of, activities. So these kind of things can be easily diffused through internet, and then especially during the pandemic situation, people, they are looking at it, and then you watch K-pop more, then you can see a lot. You can be exposed to a lot of different contents. So it helps people, to get into K-pop more than before.
Yeah, I think that's really fascinating. I'm glad you mentioned, because I've had this personal experience. I've been a fan and been interested in K-pop for 10 years now, which is crazy to think about. But I have several friends who have become interested during the pandemic, and it's partially because the access is so easy. For example, I will be watching, an online concert, or I'll plan to watch an online concert, and I'll, just kind of ask my friends, do you want to watch with me? I'm paying for it anyway, do you want to take the second login? Because usually you pay for one ticket and two people can watch it at the same time. And then after that, oh, do you want to know more about them? I'll go on YouTube and send a link, 10 things you need to know about this group or this person. And it's really very easy to get so much information. And as you mentioned, Dr. Park, it really is very fan driven, and fans will spend a lot of time putting together every single clip to show the key points of the person's personality, as well as their singing or dancing abilities. So this community aspect, the communal aspect that Dr. King-Arin also mentioned, is really important between fans, as well as between fans and the group that they're interested in. So this has really become, I think, even more heightened during the pandemic. So in addition to online concerts, have you seen any other interesting trends from the industry side or within fans, within fandom, that have arisen because of the switch to totally digitized content? Either of you, I guess.
Yeah. No, I'll go first, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I kind of see two trends. The first, of course, is as technology advances, Korean companies are very well positioned to take advantage of that. And we see evidence of this already. So in the online concert realm, you saw, for example, the using of things like augmented reality or virtual reality. So this idea of like in the online concerts, it's not just a backdrop now, but it's using immersive technologies in order to stage the design or design the stage, or, they're not just an outer space kind of backdrop, they're in outer space, in the concert. And so I think that use of virtual reality or augmented reality is already happening, actually. So I think these kind of technological trends will continue to happen. The other one that I see is, of course, is the use of artificial intelligence. So if you look at a group like aespa, for example, which is a girls K-pop group with 4 members, they have the 4 members, so they have Karina and Winter and Ning Ning, but they also have avatars of, so it's AE Karina, AE Ning Ning, AE Winter, so they have the real people, and then they have also the avatars, and together they make the group aespa. So that's quite interesting, to see them pushing. I know JYP in your clip, Jimin, said that he was going to invest in humans. Now we have actually investing in non-humans, right? The avatars are going to be the idols, not the actual people, which I think, to be totally honest with you, is probably a lot easier for the production companies to manage, because there are no dating scandals or anything like that. When you're dealing with an avatar, there's nothing messy, but it's also not human. And so I'm not sure that the fans are actually going to go for that, because in my research anyway, fans are, they're driven by the human side of it. The emotional side of it actually is the key component. The second thing I would say is I think that K-pop has had a huge impact on notions of masculinity across the world. So we see new models of masculinity. And when I show clips of, say, K-pop boy groups or male groups, to Westerners, so in Europe and also in the United States, the first response that I always get, almost always without fail, is they are wearing earrings and jewelry, and they're wearing tons of makeup, and they have pink hair, and they look like girls. Are they gay? Right. And so I think, again, this is a real really different model of masculinity than maybe exists, and particularly in the Western world, in terms of the kind of macho man image that and I think that it's really interesting. It's also a very different view of Asian men that existed in this kind of 70s, 80s, and 90s, of the nerdy, glasses wearing, electrical engineering student at Berkeley. Now we have, they're super attractive, they're physically very fit, they're sleekly dressed. And this idea of the flower boy or the pretty boy has, I think, really challenged that macho, hegemonically masculine image. And certainly when we interview fans, one of the main reasons they like a band like BTS is that they are okay with being, kind of feminine, masculine men, and that is totally normal and is accepted, and they're kind of fed up with toxic, kind of hegemonic macho masculinity, and that's one of the reasons they like K-pop. So I think technology and masculinity. But Jimin, what do you think?
Oh, thank you very much. Oh, that's very interesting aspect. Right. You highlighted about the AI, and then AR. Anyway, I'm gonna VR, and then I'm gonna talk about another thing. Nowadays, before Korean companies, they want to work on on their own. Okay, they prefer not to have collaboration except SM Entertainment. Well, what they have done is actually, it began before pandemic. SM Entertainment, they have a lot of collaboration with international songwriters, especially from the Scandinavian countries like Danish, Finnish, and Swedish. So they collaborate a lot. So a lot of people, they believe that this is K-pop and from Korea, but also a lot of SM Entertainment the band's music. Actually, they were written by Swedish or Finnish songwriters. It's very internationalized. More recently, if you see it, the Korean companies, they do a lot of collaboration with American companies. For example, as you know, like the Jimmy Fallon show TV, they had like a BTS week. So, basically BTS, they make their own music video in Seoul, and then they send it to, the Jimmy Fallon show. And then Jimmy Fallon, they try to broadcast this kind of things. So you can see there's a lot of collaboration. Regarding the masculinity, and then that one is very interesting, especially me. I am in France, and the people, they talk about these kind of things. Let me share another PowerPoints, which can be interesting. Let's see. Okay, so basically, if the BTS and people, if you find a guy who's wearing like a pink, and the people they said, okay, there is some kind of things going on, and then we don't know what's going on, right? So they talk about these kind of things, but actually, if you know the whole story, it is very different actually. Okay, nowadays people believe that pink, that is for lady, but until 18th century in Europe, pink was only for men. Okay, so this is a symbol of virility and masculinity, which is very different from us, our time. Another interesting, okay, let's say if you saw a guy who has a lot of big ribbons around him, you may think like he, you ask about, his the sexual orientation. Okay. Well, actually, I took this one from at the Louvre Museum. Okay, in Paris. So this guy is Molière. So it's a famous, novelist. So basically, at his time, it's kind of, normal. A lot of guys just, having a lot of ribbon around, people. And also at the time, it's guys, they put a lot of, makeup. Okay? So basically, people, they are arguing, okay, BTS or, Korean, K-pop, idols, masculinity problem. They call it problem. I call it, it's just trend. It's a trend is changing. Sometimes it, you see a lot of different things going on. And then, as Rebecca already mentioned, if we compare with like the Western man and the Asian man, you believe that Korean or Asian people can have a lot of beards like Western guys, or they can have a lot of muscles just like in Western guys. It's very different. What I see from K-pop industry, I would say from economic perspective, it's more like a specialization. I mean, it's basically we do what we can do best. So this is what we can do it, and we know that we care about beauty, we care about the dress or something like that. So this is why they focus on this kind of things, group dance as well.
Right, so we actually have gotten a couple of questions about this both in advance, but also I'm seeing a couple of these in the Q&A. So I want to ask you if you see any drawbacks to some of this, to this digitization movement, to the trends you just mentioned, AI, etc., or just places to kind of keep an eye on moving forward, now that we are kind of in this more digitized space.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing I would say is that there seem to be a lot of questions actually coming into the chat about why, it's so popular. And certainly the fans say that part of the reason they're so dedicated and it's so popular is because the fan service or from a company perspective, fan first production is what they like about it, is they feel that they actually matter as fans. And of course they matter because, if one of the idols or if one of the companies has a scandal, the stock market prices drop immediately. And so they're quite careful actually about the content that it gets put out because they are publicly floated. Many of them are publicly floated companies. But from my research anyway, I think one of the big things, of course, is this kind of parasocial relationship that fans have with their kind of idols or their favorite groups. And by that, I mean, it's not a new idea, right? The Beatles or One Direction, that there's this pseudo intimate kind of fairly one-way relationship from the fans to the idols. In K-pop, you also get the idols talking a lot about, when they get asked questions like, who's your girlfriend or what's your ideal type? A lot of them will say, it's the fans. I love the fans. I want to date the fans. I want to, my ideal type is the fans. And so they often reflect it back to the fans. But I would worry a little bit about that parasocial one-way, very passionate relationship. And particularly over the last year, because fans have been stuck in their bedrooms on the computer, we see that, of course, fans can drive the success of a group like BTS, winning them the Billboard Social Award several years in a row, and winning, world records in terms of support. But I think being just on your computer and only relating through digitized or mediatized, kind of ways does bring a fairly narrow and technologically mediated view of the world, which for many is kind of a fantasy. And so this is why fans get upset when their idol starts actually dating or marries someone, is because in their fantasy world, they were the potential girlfriend, or everyone's the potential, 10 million of them are the potential girlfriends, right? But I think for some fans, that's maintained possibly beyond where it's maybe healthy for it to be. And to remember, of course, that content that they're viewing is very carefully curated. Even the behind the scenes stuff is very carefully curated and performed. And also it's a business. So, the business wants you to keep coming back. And I think Jimin's thing is right, that actually the companies have figured out, and every time a digitized interaction, social interaction goes on, even if it's motivated by parasocial relationship or, kind of love and adoration, those companies are recording all that big data and using that in order to target their marketing and to figure out how to better recruit more members. I think the other thing is that having said that, being worried about people's kind of emotional relationship only through technology, I have to say in my research before the pandemic, in person at like local fan meetups and cup sleeve events and K-pop discos and concerts, that actually the fans, when they meet other fans in real life, actually also form relationships with each other. And for me, that's quite positive. So the digitized, I would worry, but I think the in real life stuff has been really interesting because there are a lot of people of color, gay, lesbian, and even what I would call neurodiverse fans that have kind of fallen under the fandom and have kind of found each other through digital media. And they work very well together, as we found out last summer, of course, when they punked the Trump rally in Tulsa and bought out all the tickets, never intending to show up, or when they jammed, the Dallas Police Department, who were trying to crack down on illegal protest activities for the Black Lives Matter. K-pop fans and TikTokers got online and spammed and crashed the system. So it's very clear that they can work together, both digitally and in real life, but I would worry a little bit about the kind of mediatized kind of relationships. And then kind of the last thing I would be worrying about is I think the work conditions for the actual artists themselves. I would worry. It's very difficult to get access to figure out what those exactly are, or what the contracts actually say, what the percentage of the profits actually are. And I would be worrying about the work conditions, particularly the mental health of many of the artists, as I think we have seen. I mean, I don't want to that happens in every industry, I would say, across the world. We saw it in the Olympics this week, right, of course, with Simone Biles. But I think, again, I think that we need to think about, the working conditions and keeping everybody healthy, including the fans, while it's going on. Sorry, that was sort of long.
Well, before COVID, I traveled here and there in order to talk about, give lecture about the K-pop and Korean drama and Korean film industry. One thing, I was often asked, that is about the backlash of K-pop. But the thing is, well, from my view, it is more like a company. They try to focus on their business. So this is why they promote their group and they work with others. Okay. However, somehow Korean government is using K-pop, and they said we helped. They try to give some kind of message that behind the success of K-pop there is Korean companies, and then actually I feel this is very dangerous. For example, like in 2012. At the time, K-pop was very popular in Korea, and then in order to detour some domestic problem at the time, the president Lee Myung-bak visited the Dokdo, or from Japanese view, is Takeshima, and this is an island between Korea and Japan. So he decided to visit. And then, it became like a huge problem. And then a lot of Japanese, K-pop fandom, they said, okay, this is not really good. This is very disappointing. And then there was kind of anti-K-pop or anti-Hallyu movement, Another thing is like after 2017, when Korean government decided to deploy the U.S. missile in Korea, what we call like a THAAD issue. So at the time, there is a huge backlash in China. Okay, so I said, like, if the Korean government didn't utilize or did not exploit K-pop, I'm sure the Korean music industry did not have this kind of problem. Okay, so this one, like behind the success, Korean government always argued it is us. We try to help. We are the one who helped the emergence of K-pop. So this is one thing. Another thing that I focused, I got asked a lot. That is about the fandom. Well, a lot of people in East Asia, like Vietnam and Thailand, they often ask me, okay, this is not for guy. K-pop, it is only female, and then they just like K-pop, and that's it. But then, in fact, this is not correct. Actually, I met also a lot of American, male, and then heterosexual, and they said, I like BTS, I like, Blackpink, and the Blackpink is okay, but if I said I like BTS, then this is a problem. So they said, they are like a shy K-pop fan, a lot of guys, so they don't talk about it. But one thing very interesting, when, male guys, they just go to, soccer game, football game, and then after that there is a huge riot or fighting, whatever. The newspapers, they don't talk about this one, okay? But when they see there is a lot of female young ladies, go to stadium to see BTS BTS concert or something, in the newspaper they argue, okay, this is something, this is very strange. There's a full of, ladies. Okay, so I think that this is kind of the media, of course, they try to attract attention from others, so they are just highlighting this kind of things as a problem. So I see this kind of things is a kind of problem though.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned this. It's a especially recently, this has come up a lot on a lot of fandom spaces. Why are we always talked about in this way, like we're crazy fans for just going to a concert and enjoying ourselves? But I also find it reminds me also of interesting conversations, and we have a couple of questions in the chat about this as well. People are always really curious, why K-pop? Why do people like it so much? What is it about this? This content that people love so much? And personally, and please feel free to, agree or disagree, there's a lot of stuff you can say about the way that technology emerged, the way that politics changed in Korea that affected the music industry coming from the 80s to the 90s to today. I think all of those things play an important role, but I also think it's important to remember that it's also really good, right? Like it's good music, it's good dancing. It's really, innovative sometimes in terms of genre and trying new things with technology, things like that. So just pointing out, as both of you have kind of said, there's a lot of reasons between, why people have really gotten pulled into these interesting fan communities. But we also have to bring it back to the fact that the content itself is actually just very good as well. So yes, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I think you've hit on something really important, Jenna, which is and G mentioned this as well. It's an interesting combination though, because it's very clear to me, for example, that in a lot of the K-pop music, it's very hip hop, right, and rap driven. So it's African American music, right? It's an African American music genre that gets some people would say appropriated. Other people would say, they're respecting the tradition and they're trying to build on it, in terms of African-American hip hop and rap music. But what I think I really see is it's, youth culture now is based around hip hop and rap across the world. And they do it incredibly well. And the synchronized dancing and all of that stuff, again, you can see that it's very global actually. And I think a lot of people really like it, but a lot of fans also really like it because it's different. And that's the K in K-pop. I mean, there are some people who argue that there is no K in K-pop. It's actually not Korean. I would kind of disagree. I actually think there is something quite culturally Korean about it. And I think that's what drives a lot of fans to like it, because it is Korean and it is different. We've interviewed people from, rural Wisconsin who the only way they can have access to this is through YouTube, but they're hugely dedicated fans and they're teaching themselves Korean and they dream of, flying or visiting Korea someday. So in that sense, I think it is both kind of exotic and different and also the same at the same time.
One thing I really want to pick up on also is something that Dr. Park, you mentioned the role of the Korean government, and we've had a lot of interest about this as well. The concept of Hallyu, the Korean wave, being driven in part, at least initially, by the Korean government very strongly. So I'm curious to ask about this, especially in this time of a pandemic, when everything is digitized, everything is online. What do you see about the role of the Korean government in creating kind of the soft power for Korea through Hallyu during this pandemic period?
Okay. Thank you very much for the question. First, I want to share, one slide, just, to refresh a little bit, okay? So let me share that one. Okay, I will not play any music here, but, I'm sure that there's a lot of people who love, classical music, okay? I just wonder if there's anyone who have heard the terminology like A classical music or G classical music and I classical music. I just wonder if there's anyone. Okay, probably not, because I'm the one who invented this kind of terminology. For me, A classical music means basically classical music produced in Austria, and G classical music means classical music produced in Germany, and I classical music means classical music produced in Italy. But I wonder, is there anyone who listens to classical music because this is from, Austria, this is from Germany, or this is from, Italy? Okay. So actually, when you enjoy music, you do not think about the nationality, but you enjoy just music because you like it. Okay. Well, here I just put 3 songs, but I will not play it. Okay. The first one is BTS, okay, Dynamite. And the second one is Mic Drop, Japanese version. And then the third one is Mic Drop, or Korean version. Okay, the interesting thing is all of three is a song by BTS, but the Dynamite, it is classified as American pop. Okay. And then Mic Drop, Japanese version is classified as Japanese J-pop. And then the last one, of course, this is K-pop. Okay. So basically, people, they like this kind of things because they love the music, because the quality is good, because of the, they dance well, and they are pretty, and they are cool. Okay, that's generally mentioned. So, the connection between, the government, the nationality, Korea, and this one, you have to think about different way around. Okay, now what I talk is about the music, okay, the musical side. Now, if you think about, the appearance, like a dance move and makeup and dress, and then as Rebecca said, this is completely Korean thing. So this one is the aspect that you have to think about Korea. Okay, so this is basically, you have to think about this kind of way, then why K-pop is really popular? Because of, the way people consume music is different. Basically, a long time ago, it was more like, Walkman or radio. So basically, what you listen to, that is basically, the music itself, or sometimes lyrics. Okay. So American people, they said, okay, I understand people enjoy, American pop music or music in English, but I can understand why people enjoy K-pop because they don't understand Korean language. The thing is, like, you have to understand twice. Okay, you just see things in United States. If you see things out of United States, it's a very different story. For example, my parents' age, when they were young in 1960s, they enjoy, American pop, not because they can understand 100% of lyrics, but they love the music because it is cool. Once they love the music, they say, oh, I really, really want to know the meaning, what they are singing for. Okay, then they study English, try to find some words in dictionary, and then they find, oh, okay, this is the meaning. Okay, the K-pop has exactly the same, the path. So people, they just love the dance move and then the music, and then there are some people who is interested. Okay, what are you talking about? They just want to know, the language. So they just study and then they share. So these kind of things happen a lot. Now, what I tried to do was like disconnecting the nationality and the music, okay, because of the government. If you know the whole history of the Korean music industry since 1950s, so after Korean War, okay, the Korean War is very important because before we have some music which is called like a trot. Okay, this is very similar to enka. It's a Japanese music, so it's more like a mixture of local traditional music and American foxtrot. Okay, and then after 1950s, basically Korea was poor and people, they don't have any money to enjoy music. For them, just living for day is very difficult. So no time to enjoy entertainment at all. At the time, for musicians, the only way they can make money, this is like a performance on US Army bases. Okay, so that means basically at the time the consumer is US soldiers, young soldiers. So the musicians, they had to accept or adapt American style of music. Okay, so this is what happened. In 1970s, there's a very interesting thing. Basically, government, they were against this kind of music. They said, this is not Korean traditional thing, and this is destroying the Korean spirit or Korean tradition. So this is not good. But people love to listen to this kind of American music. In 1970s, because of copyright, the American companies, they said, oh, no, this is not good. You just make a lot of piracy, and then no good. And the Korean music industry adopted a lot of things from Europe. So basically, based on American influence, there's a lot of European influence in Korea. And then in 1990s, of course, it's J-pop, okay? So we are adopted. So basically, we are globalizing, update. We accepted the most popular thing at the time, okay? And then now this is the K-pop, okay? This is why people love it, okay? Now, people always try to connect Korean government and then K-pop. But now, let me tell you something different. If it is not K-pop, but it is like, sports player, like a tennis player, okay? Or like a music industry, if it was really well known, and I'm sure then Korean government utilize, tennis player or, the actor and actresses. Then they try to connect this one with soft power, okay? So whenever there is something and the government, they try to utilize these kind of things, okay? So what I want to do is like, although we got a lot of impression that behind the success of K-pop, there's a government, but the connection is very loose.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would agree with Jim, and I think soft power, I mean, it's working, right? Tourist numbers before the pandemic, tourist numbers are up particularly Western tourists wanting to go to Korea, driven in large part by consumption of K-pop. BTS is speaking in the UN, and President Moon has made them, a special envoy. So they are actually out there doing international relations type work. People want to buy Korean products. It's not just K-pop, of course. In the chat, it's pointed out, certainly health and beauty products, your Samsung phone, your car, So I think it's working in that sense. But I think one of the things we kind of can't forget is that soft power is still linked to hard power in the Korean context. So yes, even BTS will have to serve in the South Korean military eventually. And I think that, again, that tax money, it goes back into the government, which has to fund a military presence because of their, troubled relationship with the North, something that we understand in Ireland, and so I think soft power, I think it's working, but I also think we have to remember the context in which that it's actually functioning.
Okay, so I think we're going to start to head into a couple of audience questions, and then we'll wrap up our discussion for today. We've covered a lot, and we have a lot of great questions too. So I apologize if we don't get to your question. I think we've covered a lot of great topics here. So hopefully people have learned a lot. I know I have. So I'm going to pick a couple of questions here, and then we'll finish up our conversation. We had several questions. People were asking about something that I believe Dr. King Orion, you mentioned with the idols themselves, mental health, concerns about fans being a little bit too connected, or even going so far as to stalk these idols, right? We had several questions about that. So if you have any thoughts about, especially with this even stronger parasocial relationship that you mentioned, how do you make sure that stars are getting the mental health support that they need, and that fans kind of are able to keep their distance?
Yeah, I mean, you have to remember the word stan, as far as I understand it, comes from stalker and fan being put together. And, Korean stans, which are, the people that you support or the people you're fans of. Yeah, it can engage very intense emotional engagement with the stars. But I think there are cultural differences in the interpretation of the division between public and private. And I think that it's possible that particularly Western fans may not understand that in Korea there is a division between public and private too, and that there is often a private life that is going on that is actually not on screen really. And I think that gets ruptured when you get these kind of scandals, if you will, where they're kind of, their real life or their real life actions start to come out into the public sphere, and fans get very, very upset. And I obviously that's not great. And I do think, again, like BTS really, they broke the mold last summer, right? They said they were going on vacation. That has never really happened before. And I think that was very positive. I was quite disappointed, though, that they continued to tweet on Twitter, the museums they were going to. And, I wish it had been actually a real a decision to actually disconnect totally for, a period of time, because I think it's good for fans to realize that if their idols do it, then maybe they would do it too, that it's actually not a bad idea to take breaks from time to time and, and actually take time out for your own mental health. But I thought that was a very positive move by them. Unprecedented, really.
Well, let me tell you something more about this one. Let me share another one. Okay, people, they say like, okay, the mental health and the attachment, but if you know the whole history in the world, and then you can see actually there's a similar case in Western Europe as well. For example, like the pronunciation German, it's a backpack, okay, the virtual fever. I'm sure that you know these kind of things, okay. So it was written by Goethe, and then it was really, really popular in Europe, okay. So basically, they can see, the people, they are wearing the, something different from the others. So they try to copy the way, the main characters dress up. Okay, so that's what they did. Of course, government didn't like it, this kind of things. Another thing, because of the story, it was really, really sad. And in the end, there's some people, the person who committed suicide. And then after that, the people, they just followed exactly the same thing. Okay, so from this one, it's not just very K-pop fandom uniqueness, okay, but it's more like it's like a global phenomenon. Okay, whenever there's something new or something different, when people they have tendency to fall in love with that one, then they just mimic the exact same thing. Okay.
Okay, finally, I think we have a couple of questions about, kind of K-pop versus, either American pop music or other types of pop music, how K-pop was able to transition so quickly, as we discussed, to this, more online world that we're living in right now. And also the way that Korean fandoms have been more developed than perhaps Western music fandoms. Can you talk a little bit more about that and what that means for both the industry and fans, especially as we, hopefully transition out of a pandemic situation soon?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are some things that are going to remain. I noticed a question in there about K-pop fan signs online. That's something I could see them hanging on to, because you can certainly cycle through more people faster without the trouble of travel and queuing and all this kind of stuff. But by just doing it on Zoom, like academic conferences. I mean, I think there are other things that will probably change and be a hangover. I don't see it totally being replaced, though, by technology. I think the fans still would prefer to meet the idol in person, to go to the concert in person, and that collective consciousness or almost euphoria you feel at the concert. I think people, at the bottom line is people are human and they want the human connection. And I think that's what really drove the last year, is the need for content and also human connection. And again, K-pop was well positioned because their fan service was already so diverse and so constant. I mean, you literally could be receiving content from Monsta X or 17 around the clock. In terms of 24 hours, 7 days a week, there would be new content posted. And if you're on multiple platforms, it's almost hard to keep up because there's so much. So I think that's very different than the American fan context. And so you get K-pop fans actually defying behavioral scientists who've measured market behaviors. So K-pop fans actually buy CDs and albums, even though they don't need to, because they can stream on Spotify or on Apple Music, right? But they buy it because they want to support their band, right? Or their favorite. And they also want the little merch inside. They want the photo cards and the badges and the, stickers. And I think that, again, that's why the K-pop fan, it is different culturally, and there's involvement at every stage. So even when you go to the concerts, there's fan chants, right? So the fans participate in the concert, chanting back and forth between the artists and themselves. And that, well, recreated online, it wasn't quite the same, I don't think.
Yeah, if I can just jump in and then I'll go to Dr. Park. I'm very curious your thoughts too. Completely agree. It was, having done some research on this and talked to a lot of fans who attended online concerts or chose not to attend online concerts, for a lot of them, it was kind of, well, this is what we have for now, and it's amazing that we have it, and I will absolutely, consume this content, and I appreciate it during a time of a pandemic. But as soon as there is a concert in person, I'm there. Like the moment that it happens, I'm there. Or even fans who haven't attended in-person concerts before or don't necessarily want to sometimes travel quite far or can't travel far to attend an in-person concert, they would even express that it's different watching a video of a concert that took place in person. Even if it's still them watching a video, they can feel the difference in energy from the audience, from the artists themselves. They can see something different about a recording of a live in-person concert versus a recording of a COVID, fully digital online concert with no audience whatsoever. So it is really interesting to see. And I think that going forward, there will have to be some, hybrid or, some sort of model that allows those fans to have that human connection, like you were saying, that I think fans really are craving, especially as we get into 18 months plus of this pandemic now. So yes, Dr. Park, what do you think about how we're moving forward?
I totally agree with you. And then what Rebecca said, human touch is very important for this kind of things, especially here. I mean, at this moment, what we feel is we need to be there, being in concert home and, being in front of TV or, computer is completely different. With the current technology, there's nothing better than the actual concert. So, I think, for a while, although, COVID is there and then it's kind of difficult to move around, across the world, whatever, but still people prefer to have concert unless there's something new which has more value than concert. So we don't know exactly what it can be. So basically, I agree with you. Another just adding thing, while I was doing some research about the industries, because of the COVID, there's a very interesting aspect in Korean pop music industry. They know in the Korean music industry already said for next 2 or 3 years, it is kind of hard to have new groups or to have concert. Okay, so what they are doing currently is they are collecting or recruiting a lot of trainees who are much younger than before, because they want to debut these groups like 2 years or 3 years later. Okay, so which means basically maybe after COVID, when it is completely finished, the age group of K-pop band can be much younger than before. Okay, this is bad. Well, I don't think this is bad. This is not, again, the industry changed and the people, they also changed. So we don't know exactly what's going to happen. But anyway, there's something. But still, human touch is very, very important. And still you have to think about this one.
All right, well, we could talk about this all day, of course, and all of us do often talk about these things all day. But I think we should stop there. Thank you so much for your great insights, both of our panelists. Thank you for attending. And I'm going to throw it over to Gigi to wrap us up.
Jenna, Dr. King Orion, and Dr. Park, thank you for the lively discussion this evening. I've seen a lot of quality comments and questions coming in from our Facebook streaming and also from our Zoom audience. This discussion has surely brought insights on how K-pop has got to where it is and what lies ahead. And most importantly, we have explored an aspect of popular culture from an academic perspective. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. We have a brief poll on tonight's program for the audience on Zoom. If you are watching us on Facebook or YouTube, you can leave your answers in the comments below as well. While you complete the survey, let me tell you more about our program on Tuesday, August 3rd at 8:30 p.m. Hong Kong time, which we will look at the K-drama, the globalization of K-drama, and it'll feature scholars and industry experts and how this globalization of K-drama and over-the-top or OTT media platforms like Netflix have changed the game for K-drama productions. We will also look at some interesting consequences that K-drama consumption has brought to the society and what the future may look like as K-drama continues to attract more investment and viewers around the globe. Make sure to follow us on our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube channel, and also UNCAPA's website for further information. And please register for next Tuesday's event. We look forward to seeing you again on August 3rd. Good night, everyone.